Imagine it's 31 March 2022. You are a 42-year-old schoolteacher living in Kandy, Sri Lanka. You rent a small 2-bedroom house with a blue gate, a mango tree in the yard, and a motorbike parked beside the steps. Your salary is not large, but it is steady, and over 15 years you have built a careful life. A little gold from your wedding, some rupees in the bank, a rice tin always half full, school shoes for your son, bus fare for your daughter, and enough saved to believe tomorrow will look like today. In the morning, you boil tea before sunrise because the power has become unreliable, but you still iron your shirt. You check your students' notebooks and tell yourself the shortages will pass. Everyone says the country is under pressure, but pressure is an invisible thing, like termites in a roof beam. The house still stands, so you assume the damage cannot be that bad. If you have ever wondered why a country can look normal right up until the moment normal life breaks apart, stay with me. What you're about to hear is not a theory. It is a pattern. It has happened before in different countries, under different flags. It happened with different leaders and different excuses. And if you find value in this kind of historical clarity, subscribing takes 2 seconds and keeps you ahead of what most people never see coming. By afternoon, the line at the fuel station has wrapped around the block. By evening, the lights are out for hours. By the next morning, parents are calling to say their children cannot come to school because buses are not running and there is no diesel. In the weeks that follow, power cuts stretch past 10 hours a day. Food prices start climbing like water up a wall. In April 2022, Sri Lanka suspends payment on its foreign debt, which means the government can no longer keep up with what it owes overseas. Later that year, headline inflation reaches 69.8%, and food inflation reaches 94.9%. By one estimate, 6.3 million people, about 1 in 3 Sri Lankans, are food insecure. This means they do not know if they can get enough to eat. What looked like a bad season turns out to be something far worse. It is not just a shortage, it is a full systems failure. And that is what this video is about. Sri Lanka's collapse was shocking, but history suggests it was not unique. It was a warning flare shot into the night. It was bright enough to light up a much wider landscape. Because when a country depends on borrowed foreign money, weak tax income, fragile banks, and constant confidence from investors, the crisis does not begin when the shelves are empty. It begins much earlier. It starts when promises quietly grow larger than the country's ability to keep them. Sri Lanka is one case, Argentina was another, Greece was another, Lebanon was another. Different decades, different languages, the same hard lesson. Collapse is rarely a lightning strike. It is more like a shoreline being eaten grain by grain until one morning the road is simply gone. And if over 50 countries today are facing severe debt pressure or urgent debt relief needs, then Sri Lanka is not just a tragedy to remember, it is a pattern to study. Before we go further, there is something important to understand. Countries do not usually break because one bill comes due on one unlucky day. They break because their whole way of living becomes a mismatch. Picture a family that earns in one kind of money, but owes the mortgage and the car payment in another kind of money. They owe the grocery bill in a currency that keeps getting more expensive. At first, it can cope by borrowing more, selling jewelry, or hoping next month will be better. But if income stays weak and the bills keep rising, then one day even small problems become deadly. A missed payment becomes panic. Panic becomes withdrawals. Withdrawals become shortages. That is the basic mechanism here. Many fragile countries borrow in dollars or euros because lenders trust those currencies more than the local one. They use that money to buy fuel, medicine, food, and time. Time is the most important purchase of all. Time to delay reform. Time to avoid anger. Time to keep the lights on. But borrowed time is like building a second floor on wet concrete. It looks solid while the sun is shining. Then the cracks spread from underneath. Now add the banking system. Banks often buy large amounts of government debt. That means the state leans on the banks, and the banks lean on the state, like two tired men trying to stand by holding each other up. If confidence disappears, both can fall together. The government cannot pay. The banks cannot return deposits. Ordinary people discover that the number on their statement and the cash in their hand are not the same thing. That is why these crises feel so personal. They are not just about budgets and bond markets. They are about trust turning into smoke. This brings us directly to the first part of the story. Long before Sri Lanka, Argentina showed how fast a middle-class life can crack. It cracks when a country ties itself to a promise it can no longer afford. In 1991, Argentina adopted a currency board, which fixed 1 peso to $1. A peg, in simple terms, means locking your currency to another one and promising not to move it. At first, that promise looked brilliant. It helped crush inflation, which means runaway price rises. And for a time, it gave people something precious, faith in money again. Stores could plan, families could save. Imports felt cheap. The country seemed modern, disciplined, almost reborn. But the promise had a hidden cost. Argentina was now wearing a suit stitched to the dollar, even when the weather changed. If the US dollar strengthened, Argentina became more expensive. If neighbors devalued, Argentina became less competitive. Because the government still spent heavily and borrowed more, the fixed exchange rate became a golden mask over a tired face. By 2001, public debt had climbed to 62.2% of GDP. The economy had already been shrinking for years. From 1998 to 2002, total output fell by nearly 20%. Ordinary people did not talk about output. They talked about hours, bills, and fear. They saw shops close. They saw jobs disappear. By December 2001, unemployment hit 18% and later rose above 20%. As cash left the banks, the government moved to stop the bleeding. On 30th November and 1st December 2001, leaders imposed the Corralito, a policy that sharply limited cash withdrawals. For many people, that meant only about $250 or pesos a week, roughly $1,000 a month. Imagine earning money honestly for years, then being told your bank account is real but not available. It was like being shown a loaf of bread through glass while your children were hungry. Look at what happened next. On 5th of December, the IMF withheld a loan payment. On 7th December, Argentina announced it could no longer guarantee payment on debt. Protests spread, supermarket looting began, riots broke out across major cities. On 20th of December, President Fernando de la Rua resigned as unrest left 28 people dead. In a matter of days, a country with banks and schools began to feel like a stage set after the actors had fled. And this is where history gets uncomfortable. The people hurt first were not reckless gamblers. Many were the careful people, salaried workers, pensioners, shop owners, families who believed the point of discipline was safety. According to an IMF study, poverty in Argentina rose from 38.3% in October 2001 to 52.2% in May 2002. Unemployment reached 21.4% in May 2002. The middle class did not vanish overnight, but it was pushed through a trapdoor. Some families joined barter clubs. Some were paid late. Some were paid in weak pesos after planning their lives around a promise. The mechanism was brutally simple. Argentina promised stability through a hard link while carrying too much debt and too little growth. When recession squeezed the country, the promise stopped acting like armor and started acting like a cast around a broken leg. It prevented movement at the very moment movement was needed. The fixed exchange rate strangled the economy. Then confidence snapped and the bank doors became the front line of the crisis. If your bank balance is visible on a screen but the state can suddenly tell you when to use it, is that really your money? Drop your answer in the comments, seriously. Because what I am about to show you next changes everything. This leads to the second part of this story. Greece in 2015 looked very different from Argentina in 2001. It used the euro. It belonged to the European Union. It had tourists, shipping, ancient ruins, and modern banks. To many outsiders, Greece did not look like a place where ordinary people would queue at cash machines just to pull out a few notes. But history does not care about appearances. It cares about balance sheets and broken promises. After joining the euro, Greece borrowed cheaply for years. Cheap borrowing feels wonderful at first. It is like living in a house where every room has bright lights because the bill has not arrived yet. But after the global financial crisis, the bill arrived. Greece's debt problem exploded into view. Rescue packages provided billions in aid, but the loans came with hard conditions, meant to cut deficits and reshape the economy. By 2015, after years of pain, Greece's economy was more than a quarter smaller than before the crisis. Then came the summer when the illusion finally cracked in public. Negotiations between Athens and its creditors failed in June 2015. The European Central Bank froze emergency funding. That sounds technical, but the meaning was simple. The oxygen tube was pinched. Without that support, Greece moved to stop money leaving the banks. Capital controls were imposed. Banks shut for 3 weeks. Cash withdrawals were limited to 60 euros a day. Transfers abroad were heavily restricted. Even if you had money in the bank, the state and the crisis stood between you and its full use. The Greek crisis was also about being trapped inside a currency you could not print and a system you could not easily bend. Countries with their own money can sometimes devalue and spread part of the pain through prices. Greece, inside the euro, had far less room. It had to try internal devaluation by cutting wages and spending. It is like trying to lose weight by draining the blood instead of trimming the diet. The human cost was immediate. Pensioners stood outside banks in the summer heat. Small businesses struggled to pay suppliers. Pharmacies worried about imported medicine. Families counted notes at ATMs like soldiers counting bullets. At the end of June 2015, Greece missed a 1.5 billion euro payment to the IMF. Then the political drama peaked. The government called a referendum on creditor terms. Greek voters rejected the proposal by a large margin. A week later, after all-night talks, Greece still agreed to a new package that could provide up to 86 billion euros. The lesson was not that democracy failed. The lesson was narrower and colder. Once a country's banks, state, and creditors become tangled together, even powerful-looking systems can become cages. Greece had roads, ports, and universities. Yet ordinary people still found themselves measuring life in 60 euro pieces. A locked bank is a locked bank in any language. The state needs cash, the banks need trust, the public needs access. And then there was Lebanon. For years, Lebanon looked rich. There were banks everywhere, and dollars seemed abundant. The country's financial system offered high interest rates that pulled in money from the Lebanese diaspora. In reality, much of the system depended on fresh dollars arriving to support promises already made. Beirut cafes stayed busy. New towers rose. Weddings were lavish. Cars were expensive. People believed they were safe. But a large banking system on top of a weak state is like a cathedral built on sand. The beauty makes the danger easy to ignore. Lebanon's government ran chronic deficits for years. The state borrowed heavily. The banking sector became deeply exposed. In 2019, the crisis burst into the open. Banks imposed harsh restrictions on withdrawals and transfers. People with dollar deposits found themselves trapped. Their money was there on paper, but not in usable form. Lebanese began talking about lallers, meaning dollars stuck inside the banking system that could not be withdrawn freely. The World Bank said Lebanon's crisis was one of the top 10 economic collapses in the world since the 1850s. Real GDP fell massively. Inflation averaged 145% in 2021. The currency lost more than 98% of its value. More than 80% of the population was below the poverty line. Financial system losses reached $72 billion. It felt like humiliation. Retirees who thought they were prudent became beggars to their own banks. Medicine became harder to afford. The middle class was not simply squeezed. It was hollowed out like a tree eaten from the center. Lebanon was brought down by a machine that needed constant fresh dollars just to pretend it was healthy. Sri Lanka, Argentina, Greece, Lebanon. 4 different histories. Once you strip away the flags, the same bones show. Most people keep trusting systems they do not understand. If you are still here, you are not most people. Hit subscribe. The trouble begins long before the panic. The state and the banks get tied together so tightly each becomes a hostage. The real danger appears when debt is paired with a weak ability to earn foreign currency and low tax collection. Confidence is a strange material. It looks like stone until the second it behaves like glass. Sri Lanka is important because it made the invisible visible. The heaviest blow lands on people who did the right things. The pensioner, the small shop owner, the teacher with savings in the bank, every plan becoming a luxury. In Cyprus, in 2013, the banking sector had become enormous. When the system broke, rescue came with a bail-in. A company can survive a weak month. It may not survive when its oxygen is poured into concrete. The middle class is often more exposed than the very poor in the first stage. Its savings are domestic. Its wages are fixed. A national collapse is never only a story about finance. It is a story about time being stolen from ordinary lives. Confidence is not a switch. It is a garden. History offers memory, and memory is like a lighthouse. It does not move the rocks. It just helps you see them in time. Subscribe for more, and I will see you in the next one.